Can you guys see my screen?
Yeah, it looks good.
Okay. Nice. Sorry for the delay, guys. Well, a few technical difficulties, but I'm happy to be here.
Yep,
Wait,
you're all good. You can start whenever you're ready.
Okay. I just want to confirm that. Okay, so you can still see my screen because for some reason I'm not seeing it on the Discord. Do speakers not see their screen on the Discord, or is that?
I know I can see it, which means that the rest of the
Okay,
audience
everyone
can see it.
else can. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, nice. Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning or good evening for depending on where you're coming from. My name is Onyeka Okafor, and before I get into my presentation, I would just like to quickly tell you a bit about myself. So I am Nigerian. I got my bachelor's degree in computer science and my master's degree in data science. And because I have many interests, it was very difficult for me to pick a specific career path. And that was something that I used to be a little bit insecure about. But now I just see it as an opportunity to explore different things, different interests. And when I saw that CS Girlies was giving people the opportunity to speak about tech for wellness, I was very intrigued because I'm a big sucker for all things rest and relaxation. One of my favorite things to do is like just relax and chill. But then I hesitated a bit because in my mind, tech and wellness didn't really go together. I thought it was like, I thought those were two separate things. So I couldn't really quite come up with a topic. So I decided to just leave it for some time. And I didn't really think too much about it. I just started with the topic and like I kept exploring my interest at the time, which is still an interest of mine, which is neuroscience. And yes, so like I'm very fascinated by the brain. I think, like the brain really fascinates me because you can like do an organ transplant for every other organ in the body and someone can still be themselves, but if you transplant someone's brain it wouldn't really make any sense because they wouldn't really be themselves without their own specific unique brain. So because our identity is very much tied to our brain, that is one of the many reasons why I'm fascinated by the brain. So as I kept exploring this topic, I started to think about ways in which we can sort of manipulates our brains in a way to be at a state of rest with technology. And that was how I was able to eventually come up with this topic, Neuro-Rest. If you didn't see it, Neuro-Rest, tech for your brainwaves. So before I dive into like the technological part of it, I just want to like establish like the reasons why we should rest. Rest for various reasons, many different reasons. And I decided to focus on 6 reasons for this presentation. So the first one that I wanted to talk about was improved cognition. So I'm sure most of you have been in a situation where you've been working on a problem for a while. It could be math or a coding problem or anything that you couldn't quite figure out at the time. And then you decided to take a step back, maybe talk to your sibling or like take a nap or maybe even leave the problem to the next day. And something about that led to you being able to more easily find the answer. I remember like during my one of my undergrad courses, a professor of mine used to encourage us to go and take walks in the parking lots, like while we were trying to debug some of the problems that he gave us. And we used to laugh about it, but now that I have learned a bit more about neuroscience, I can look back and see that advice completely aligns with how our brains work. So when we hit a mental block and then take a step back to rest or relax or something, our brains move from a state of focused, rigid thinking to one of resting and wondering. And that movement allows the brain to drop false assumptions that were being made while we're so focused on the problem and make new connections from seemingly unrelated memories. And that gives us new and novel ways to solve problems. And this allows the brain to, in this state, our brain sort of unconsciously sorts through different patterns to try to figure out the solution to the problem. And then it comes to our conscious mind when the right answer is found. And yeah, I can, like, if you remember the story that I just said about how I couldn't quite figure out a topic, like figure out how to talk about tech for wellness, but I just kept living my life and it just came into my mind just by the brain unconsciously sorting through various ways in which I can approach the topic. So yes, rest is very important for improved cognition. Memory, improved memory is also another reason why we need to rest. We need to take rest seriously. And, memory can be a whole topic on its own. Like, it's another topic that I'm very fascinated by. And yes. So in the neuroscience space, there is still a lot to be discovered about how our memories work. But one of the things that we do know is that resting plays a huge role in solidifying our memories. I don't know if any of you are familiar with like the World Memory Championships. For those that might not be familiar with the topic, it's pretty much a memory competition where people perform feats with their memory that you probably didn't think were possible. I would encourage you guys to, look into it a bit to see what people do. But yeah, one of the memory champions in 2018, I think, Yenja Wintersoul, who was a very accomplished memory champion, said that a lot of her memory training had to do with sleeping enough and eating enough. So that shows that, rest plays a huge role in the power of our memory. And a bit of a background on how memories work is memories are reinforced when other memories are associated with them. So a memory technique that memory champions use is they use known locations that they have to associate new memories to them, if that makes sense. So like they sort of try to associate a new memory that you're trying to memorize to something that they already know. And that helps them to solidify the new memory better. And this is a process that the brain naturally does while we sleep. While we sleep, different connections are made. And this is a way in which memory or resting helps to improve our memories. Another thing that I wanted to talk about was emotional regulation. I'm pretty sure a lot of you have experienced being very irritable or just easily annoyed if you're tired. And I remember a specific time during my senior year in college, I went for this 2-day engineering convention where I was trying to secure a full-time role. And it required me flying to different states. I barely got enough sleep because I was just trying to network and talk to people. And then I flew back the same day. I flew back like 2 days after. And that same day I had to submit a long paper that was due. So I was working on that. So I got very minimal sleep. And I remember something, that wasn't that serious. I submitted my paper like 5 minutes after the deadline. And that made me freak out. Like I called my mom freaking out, like being like, oh my gosh, wow, like I pretty much was crying to her. And I'm sure she was like wondering what was going on. Like it wasn't really that serious. But then I remember taking a long nap and then waking up feeling perfectly fine. So yeah, it just shows that, when you sleep, something about sleeping helps you just stabilize your emotions. And how it works is when the brain sleeps, there is a chemical that is associated with stress and anxiety. And while we are sleeping, that chemical is no longer being secreted. So the brain is able to like replay whatever was upsetting you before you slept in a non-stress induced environment, in a chemical-free environment. And that allows the brain to sort of remove the emotional sting from it. Obviously, like this is just speaking in very general terms. I know that it doesn't always work that when you wake up, you feel better. But like generally, I found that this has been true. And the next thing I want to talk about is healing, health and healing. Resting plays a huge role in our health and our body's abilities to heal itself. Yes, it might be shocking to find out that our brains actually get dirty. Yes, so there tends to be metabolic toxins like metabolic toxins, metals, mercury, different things that are not supposed to be in the brain can build up in the brain over time. And long term, this can lead to brain fog, memory loss, or can even lead to diseases like Alzheimer's or Parkinson's. And but thankfully, these toxins are naturally cleaned out by our brains. But this typically happens while we are asleep. So it's done through the lymphatic system. And so that means that if we are not getting enough sleep, we are not giving our lymphatic system enough time, like the chance to really clean out the brain. And that can lead to unfortunate events. So, yeah, rest is very important for our health. And there was also a paper, I know some people might have mixed feelings about the use of animals for testing, but there was a paper where mice were used to carry out a test, and they were deprived in varying degrees. So there were some mice that were given enough rest, and there were some mice that were deprived of sleep. And it was found that the deprived mice were more sensitive to heating pads and just pain in general than the mice that got enough rest. So, like, we are a lot more sensitive to pain when we don't get enough rest. And also, like, if you've been to the doctors, they typically tell us to rest, rest up for whatever ailments that we might have. And yeah, so the next point is that they facilitate growth. A lot of growth hormones surge while we are asleep, and it's just important to stay alive, because about 2 to 5 weeks of sleep can lead to death. So yeah, rest can be one of the most productive things that we can do for ourselves, because we literally need it to survive and to function and to do our work well. Something else that I want to talk about is called the rest test. This was a survey, a global survey carried out by Claudia Hammond, where she surveyed over 18,000 people from 135 different countries and explored what they considered restful. And findings from this survey include that 2/3 of participants stated that they needed more rest. The average amount of rest that participants got was about 3, and this is like wakeful rest, so this is not counting sleep, resting while like during the day. And it was found that participants on average got 3 hours of rest during the day, but people that said that they got about 5 to 6 hours of rest showed higher well-being scores. And yeah, many respondents reported feeling guilty when trying to rest, because business is sort of associated with competence. So we know that there is just an issue with people being able to rest and feel like they're being productive, because business is tied to how the level of competence that we feel. So from the survey, like, there were about 20 ways in which it pretty much highlighted the top 20 most stressful things that you can do, but I'll just highlight the first 5 in this presentation. It said that reading was considered one of the most stressful things that you can do, which was surprising to find. But I think, again, like I mentioned, giving the brain the ability to just sort of wander away from the task that you are working on is very beneficial for it, because it can make connections that you might not have consciously thought of. So I think it's because reading gives the brain that opportunity to escape and forget about what is going on in our lives. So that is what makes it so restful for people. The next thing that was talked about was the fact that being in nature is considered to be a very calming experience for people. And it gets us out of like the hustle and bustle and reminds us that, we are just like small, a small speck in this big world. So that can be kind of calming, because that some of the issues that you might be facing might not be as serious as it seems when you are so focused on trying to solve it. You can just relax and just be in nature. Also, solitude is another like very restful thing that you can do, just being by yourself. Yeah, I think, as much as fun as it is to be with people that you love and people that you like talking to, it requires some energy. So it makes sense that, kind of being by yourself to rejuvenate is considered a very restful thing. And then listening to music, I think a lot of us might listen to like rain sounds or different calming tunes when we're trying to relax. And that is actually very like, that aligns with how our brain works, because the brain finds certain sounds very restful. And also just doing nothing. Doing nothing. Like when you do nothing, you're not really expending a lot of energy. So that is considered to be very restful. And then I'm going to talk about the various stages of sleep, because previously I talked about wakeful rest, but now I want to talk about sleep. There are three stages of sleep that we cycle through each night. One of them being REM sleep. In this state is when we dream. Is just associated with creativity. So, like during the day, we sort of get different pieces, like, but during this stage of sleep, the parts are kind of consolidated, and also forgetting is done in this stage. I know I talked about how sleep helps strengthen your memory, but I think or part of strengthening memory is actually forgetting things that are not as useless because that are not as useful, because if we remembered every single detail, it will kind of cloud the important details that we need for survival and just for our daily lives. So the brain does a good job of like pruning away things that are not needed in our daily life, and this happens during sleep. It just makes us nicer in general. And yeah, so this, I know I talked about how 2 to 5 weeks of sleep will lead to death. Yeah, 2 to 5 weeks of REM sleep will lead to death, generally speaking, because we don't know why. We don't really know why yet, because you can have like 7 hours of the other two stages of sleep that I'm going to talk about. But if you don't have REM sleep for about 2 to 5 weeks, a person can pass away, unfortunately. And then the next stage of sleep that I would like to talk about is the M2 stage. And in this stage, this is where short-term memory is consolidated to long-term memory. So our short-term memories go into the long term. And then the slow wave sleep, this is the stage in which our lymphatic system clears out the dirt, the dirt and the toxins that built up in our brain during the day. And also protein synthesis happens during the stage, which promotes learning as well. So yes, these stages of sleep they happen separately, and like when we get like maybe 7 to 9 hours of sleep, we kind of cycle through them. But when our sleep is poor, it can sort of lead to various sleep disorders like night terrors or vocalizing emotions or like sleep paralysis, or like maybe even performing certain actions while you're sleeping, like maybe answering the phone or having a conversation, like sleepwalking, sleep talking, acting out dreams. So all these like disorders are linked to just poor sleep. So I'm going to briefly talk about how technology can help, because I still feel like you can very much have a very restful life without needing technology. But I feel like understanding the importance of rest and understanding why it is needed can help you figure out for yourself how you can use technology to facilitate the rest that you need. So, like I mentioned, music is very important and very a good way to calm yourself. So you can listen to music. Another study that I would like to bring up was one where they compared how rested people felt when they were just sitting in their rooms by themselves, or when they were looking at a photo of nature. And they found that the people that looked at photos or like videos of nature felt a lot more calm. So I would still recommend like actually going out in nature if you get a chance to just relax. But just simply looking at a photo can also like get you to a place of like restfulness. And the hormone melatonin, which is associated with sleeping, is triggered by lights. So you can use lights to sort of trigger the melatonin in your body, and that can like help you get a better sleep by just like using lights to your advantage, like maybe getting blackout curtains if you want to make sure that you're sleeping at a certain time, and then using lights when you want to wake up, and that can help. And also we also know of the various wearable devices like Aura rings, smartwatches, and the like, and this can help you like track your sleep and see the improvements that you can make to your sleep. And yes, that's all I have for today. Thank you. I had to rush through my presentation because of the technical difficulty, but yeah, thank you so much for listening to me. And yeah, I don't know if anyone has any questions.
Yeah, thank you so much for being adaptable and still trying your best to fit into the time slot, even though you had the difficulties. But yeah, if anyone has any questions, we'll keep the chat open for a minute or two. Feel free to type those there. If not, thank you so much for your presentation. I'm sure we all really enjoyed it. And once again, the recording is going to be posted to our YouTube channel.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Mm.
I guess I have a question for the
Okay.
participants.
Okay.
Do you have any recommendations on how they can incorporate what you just talked about into their projects, maybe? Like any, I guess, brain related project ideas you might have for them, brain health related?
Brain health related projects that they can work on. So I think you can sort of incorporate the ideas that I talked about before that are considered the most stressful, like reading, being in nature, solitude, listening to music. Maybe solitude not as much, but um like seeing as these are considered some of the most restful things that you can do for yourself, you can kind of see how you can incorporate maybe sound into some of the applications, like various sounds that you can use. I think just maybe perform various studies on people to see how they react to the sounds that you can use, and then like ensure that those sounds are good for the brains of people. Yes, also nature. I don't know how you would be able to create a nature app, but I'm sure you guys are very talented in this group. So it could be like maybe a VR, a virtual reality experience for someone in nature, something like that. That could be also a good idea where you can simulate nature for people that cannot go out in nature themselves, something like that. I'd say.
Yeah, I love those ideas. Those are really cool. But yeah,
Thank you.
I didn't see any questions in the chat, so we can go ahead and end the workshop here. Thank you again, and I hope you have a really great day.